Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video is going to be about the clandestine services which are sponsored by the banking institutions and their techniques of mind restructuring through full spectrum dominance, processes, tactics, approaches, and methods. And I realize that my videos run long and they can be quite tedious. And you might think I like to hear myself talk. I don't. It's the topics that I'm discussing cannot be discussed in 15 seconds or TikTok presentations because they're too elaborate. It's not that they're complicated, because quite frankly, what the clandestine services does is not complicated. They're cover stories, they're mendacities, they're theatrical approaches to add confusion and chaos. That's very tedious and that's very time consuming, and it leads to exhaustion and people, turning the channel. But that's what they want to do, people. That is the point, is that the clandestine services who are running the show being anthropology, social science, running our society, our social fabric, they're criminals. They're absolutely mean-spirited, underhanded, cowardly, creepy perverts who are running the show. And they're sponsored by the world banks. So they have really unlimited money. They're disturbed individuals. They belong in a mental institution, but they're not. They're on their loose. They're out on the loose, and they're committing crimes, and they're exempt from any law enforcement whatsoever. They're not going to be arrested. They're not going to be arraigned. They're never going to be signing a plea agreement. They are out and about. So part of the problem is that my videos run long and I can be quite tedious because I like details to help shore up my suppositions. And we have an ADD, attention deficit society, made worse by the advent of this military weapon. The cell phone, the mobile phone, is a weapon. It runs on a grid of 5G towers and mesh and satellites above at low Earth orbit. That's a military system. Did you really think that you could conduct banking or Bitcoin or digital cryptocurrency or communicate with email, text messaging, pick up TikTok videos? Do you really think you could do that without being surveilled 24/7? This will not only GPS track you and invite pulsing radiation into your home. Besides that, it will restructure your brain. If you're addicted to fake news and fake stories and TikTok presentations, which are designed to dumb Americans down from a level that they already were very busy making a living to pay for groceries. People were already distracted through work. Today, we have a higher standard of living, allegedly. Some people do. But then we have all these video games, and we have Hollywood continuing with fake stories about celebrity status and what Dakota Johnson is wearing in a dress with no underwear, and she's on the red carpet, and she's 33 years old now, and she did attend the new, what was it called, the school that she went to in Santa Monica, the New Roads School. New roads? What was wrong with the old roads, right? Anyway, today we're going to talk about 7, and it's an incomplete list. We're going to talk about 7 religions, which are all created by the clandestine services, who are the Nazi Gestapo on behalf of the bankers. So in other words, build it and they will come, right? Didn't they have a film called Field of Dreams, right? Didn't Hollywood come out with the Field of Dreams? Yeah, and they released that film with Kevin Costner starring, with Burt Reynolds was in there. No, Burt Lancaster. I always get his name mixed up. Burt Lancaster was in there with some other Hollywood luminaries. But the star of the show was Kevin Costner, who also starred in JFK, the Oliver Silverstein film, produced or distributed by Warner Brothers and Terry Summel at Warner Brothers. So I guess they approved of the JFK, content, else they wouldn't have shown that film, right? In other words, that film doesn't depict the truth. If it did, it wouldn't have been distributed by Warner Brothers or anybody. you would never have known about JFK, and you would never have known that Oliver Stone Silverstein was involved. You wouldn't have known that. So it was approved. And so was Field of Dreams, starring Kevin Costner. And that was released on May 5th, 1989, right? And you should know that it was released by Carol Co. Pictures, which are friends, personal friends of Oliver Stone, are the two principal owners of Carol Co. Pictures, which is a CIA name, in case you didn't know where Carol Co. came from. It was the name of a CIA Panamanian company that they rebranded as a cover for porn in San Fernando Valley, which took over the operations of Manson International, a CBS Masonic Eye Columbia broadcasting system. They had a porn company called Manson International in 1953. They basically shut it down and turned all their employees over to Carol Co. Pictures in San Fernando Valley, in Van Nuys, in Canoga Park, and then they integrated in Noam Bloom, who was the #1 purveyor of porn at that time, and changed the name to Live Entertainment from, Caballero Home Video. It became Live Entertainment, and they put Jose Menendez in charge. And guess what? 90 days after The Field of Dreams was released, Build It and They Will Come, build a baseball field in a cornfield, and then people will come, right? Jose Menendez and his wife Kitty were shot to death with pump gauge shotguns, 12 gauge shotguns, in their rental home, which they didn't own and didn't really live in Beverly Hills, by professional murderers. And nobody connected the two sons, Lyle and Eric, with that murder at any time for 6 months. It wasn't until a psychologist, wackadoodle patient, went to the Beverly Hills Police Department and said that he said that they said that they killed their parents. So it's about as gossipy and hearsay evidence as you could possibly get, because there was no actual evidence to connect Lyle and Eric Menendez, age 21 and age 18, with the murder of their parents. There was no evidence whatsoever. There was no murder weapon. There was no forensics. There was no witnesses. There was nothing. There was, she said that, he said that, they said. It's just like the Charlie Manson indictment, that Susan Atkins told a story in the jail, which is kind of against the ethical code of the prisoner dilemma game. You don't talk about your case, right? And that a prostitute with another prostitute who's a drug addict, that they said, that she said, that he said to go kill some people at Benedict Canyon on Cielo Drive. Well, that's just like the Menendez case. It's all gossip, hearsay, no actual real evidence. Anyway, but if you believe it, if you believe a story that's poppycock with no evidence, then your brain has been restructured. So congratulations, MK Ultra has declared another victory. And that's the point of today's discussion, because besides LSD and besides mushroom psilocybin products, hallucinogenic drugs, that may or may not be made at Sandow's lab in Switzerland, which is now called Novartis, besides drugs from the pharmaceutical industry or mushrooms that could perhaps be hatched in a lab in your basement, besides that, and besides electroshock treatment onto your brain directly, which the CIA is fascinated by, and besides 5G towers and pulsing in the mesh neighborhood, which pulses signals into your home 24/7 now in all the smart grid neighborhoods, besides continuous exposure to radiation, to RF, radiation frequency, radio frequency, besides that, for entertainment and GPS tracking, it also is monkeying around with your brain. I don't think if you hear ringing in your ears that that's particularly, a good health problem. So I'm going to introduce the 7 religions that the CIA or the British intelligence services created. This Church of Scientology, which was started under the occult, under some devil worship in London, England, and Crowley, what was his name? I forgot. Anyway, so there was a creation of something that morphed into the Church of Scientology, which was based on auditing the members. Auditing, meaning having the members reveal personal information about themselves, writing it down, putting it into a dossier, so that you can blackmail that person if they don't renew their dues or make tidings to your church, right? Not to mention that you can control them like Manchurian candidates, because you can compromise them because they revealed their soul to you. It's sort of like the covenant of confession is to a priest. Auditing is to Church of Scientology. It's a form of confession, but they call it auditing, and you actually pay to do your audit. They have the victim pays the criminal to the perpetrator to gain reconnaissance information from within their memory. All right, then that morphed into the Church of Scientology added another division, which in London was referred to as the Church of Compulsion Analysis, or the Division of Compulsion Analysis. And they set up an office in London where they had the Playboy Club also set up an office in the same building, which is adjacent to the Grand Sheraton Hotel on Green Park, which is in close proximity to Piccadilly Circus and about a mile away from British intelligence, which is on the east side of the Thames River. It's walking distance, but you do have to go across a bridge to get to MI6. But it's close. And this is where the Roman Polanski, Sharon Tate fake wedding reception was held, at that address, where the Church of Compulsion Analysis had an office, where the Playboy Club allowed them to have a cocktail party for maybe 2 hours before the club opened to members. And only British actors and spooks from MI6, British intelligence, were at that cocktail party. And again, there's no marriage license, there's no paperwork, there's no wedding ceremony, there's no witnesses to any wedding that may have happened. It's just a Hollywood, British intelligence, BBC produced cocktail party, which was foisted upon the public as being a wedding reception. But it's a fake marriage, so if you have a fake marriage, then you have to have only fake receptions. But my point of bringing up the Roman Polanski, which was January 1968, January 24th, 1968, was that the Church of Compulsion Analysis was operating in that same building. Then it was moved to a couple different places, eventually landed in New Orleans, reincorporated in the United States, in the state of Louisiana. Then it was moved to San Francisco, but it didn't really appear in San Francisco until 1968, which is around the time of the Polanski-Tate fake wedding. That is when the church, the Process Church of Final Judgment, started using the Haight Theater, which had been renamed the Straight Theater, in Haight, Ashbury, San Francisco, and had an administrative offices located at 407 Cole Street, again, in San Francisco, in Haight, Ashbury, walking distance from the Jesuits at the University of San Francisco and the Lone Mountain Campus for Women, Jesuit, all-girls school, and St. Ignatius High School, the school for Paul Pelosi, where he attended. And then it's the headquarters for St. Agnes Parochial Elementary School, Jesuits, which is on the east side of the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, which was established officially in 1967, just a few weeks before the Summer of Love, but had been operating in that zip code for many years. Timothy Leary, the LSD maven, had been in San Francisco since 1965, as had Jim Jones of People's Temple, as had Richard Albert from Stanford University and Harvard, and University of California, Berkeley, as had Hunter S. Thompson since 1965, the gonzo fake journalist Hunter S. Thompson, a scripted journalist controlled by invisible hand, as had Bill Graham, promoter of free concerts featuring Warner Brothers and Columbia Records artists only, who get free housing in Haight-Ashbury and all get free housing in Laurel Canyon and have record deals and have their songs played on the radio. And then that is used to attract honeypot kids who are opposed to the draft mandatory conscription policy existing in 1967, and they all come to San Francisco. They flock to Haight Ashbury and Sharon Meadows to listen to the free, I said free music of contracted, Hollywood-produced, wrecking crew-assisted studio bands, Jefferson Airplane, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, George Harrison, and later John Lennon and Yoko Ono in 1969. They make an appearance. But the who's who of who's on, the popular music charts in 1967 and 68 is appearing in Haight Ashbury, either at Sharon Meadows for free or for a very low ticket price at the Fillmore Auditorium once they dispatched George Sullivan, who was mysteriously suicide shot in the head at 1 o'clock in the morning on August 2nd, 1967, the Summer of Love. And he was murdered in San Francisco during the Summer of Love. So there's nothing really loving about being shot in the head, but it did free up the Fillmore Auditorium for Bill Graham, whose real name is Wolf Krajonka, a Jewish man from New York City, formerly from Berlin, Germany, and formerly from Russia. That's who's running the free music in San Francisco. Don't you ever wonder how he could buy groceries, right? Well, Abigail Folger's mother would know. She's the one paying him. So, where do I go next? So we have Church of Scientology. Then we have a division of Church of Scientology known as the Process Church of the Final Judgment, which makes an appearance in Los Angeles too, because when I'm talking about San Francisco, I'm also talking about Manhattan, New York. I'm talking about Los Angeles. I'm talking about Hollywood. I'm talking about Santa Monica. I'm talking about San Fernando Valley. I am talking about Laurel Canyon. I am talking about Berkeley. I'm talking about University of California, Berkeley. I'm talking about the greater San Francisco Bay Area. I'm not just talking about Haight Ashbury. They had 13 free medical clinics that were set up simultaneously throughout the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm assuming they did something similar in Manhattan, New York, which had a higher population of people. I'm sure they did something similar in Los Angeles County, right? But I focused on Haight Ashbury because that just happens to be where I grew up across the bay from there. I grew up in Berkeley. I went to school in Berkeley. I went to school in Berkeley for many years. So I'm very familiar with Berkeley, and I'm very familiar with the nefarious activities in Berkeley, which included when Ronald Reagan was the governor of California, and I attended some of those so-called peace riots that the media renamed. It had nothing to do with rioting for peace. It had to do with protesting the draft, the mandatory draft, which indirectly was a protest against the Vietnam War, which was why conscription was so vital. Because nobody, and I mean nobody, wanted to go to French Indonesia to fight for no reason. We're not being threatened by, communists. Nobody knew what a communist was. But we got beat over the head every day on the fake news stories about the evil communist and the domino principle. If you let one country go, then the next the communists will be on your doormat. I'm far more concerned with wokeism and mandates here in the United States than I am about communism. Because when you use intimidation and not free choice, you've lost your way. That means that you don't believe in the Constitution of the United States, that you believe in a totalitarian, authoritative society, which I want no part of. I don't accept authority, especially when authority is dysfunctional, evil, and perverted. If you trust authority, you're going to end up in a FEMA camp, and you're going to be very unhappy. Or a zoo. You'll be in a pen in a zoo. All right, so we got Church of Scientology. Then we have a division of it called the Process Church of Final Judgment. Then we have something that's called the Church of Synanon. The Church of Synanon was really created in the late 1950s in Los Angeles County, and it's attributed to Charles Dederich. And Charles Dederich first became acquainted with Alcoholics Anonymous as a way to socially engineer and control people who are, having problems in their life due to addiction to alcohol. But it quickly morphed into something else when Charles Dederich spent time at University of California, Los Angeles, aka UCLA. And at UCLA, where they have a neuroscience center today, they have neuroscience centers pretty much everywhere today. Certainly they have them in San Francisco. They've got them in Irvine. They've got it in one at UCLA. They probably have one in your town where they want to restructure your brain using drugs and electroshock treatment. So not really much has changed in the last 70 years. They were doing that in the 50s. That's over 70 years ago. They were doing it in Manhattan at Bellevue State Hospital with Dr. Albert Laverne, who works for Sidney Gottlieb, who's not even a medical doctor. Sidney Gottlieb had a PhD in chemistry from Caltech, Pasadena, Los Angeles County. And then he goes on to be the head of MK Ultra for the CIA. And one of the first psychiatrists he employs is Dr. Albert Laverne, later, of Manhattan, who later has a 5,000 square foot home in Yonkers at Untermeyer Park, which magically and mysteriously gets arsoned to death, blown to smithereens when the Son of Sam, scapegoat, maybe killer, maybe not, who really knows. What was his name? David Berkowitz, a United States Army, Korean War veteran, went around and shot 13 people, but only could kill 6. That's definitely not a very professional terror program, right? I mean, if it's going to be professional, it'd be 13 people shot and 13 people killed. But it was 13 people shot and 6 people killed. So, it was a terror program, absolutely. But was it the highest level of professionalism? No. So could have David Berkowitz done all of those shootings? Yeah, it's possible. I think it's fairly unlikely that he would have done that all by himself because the guy didn't really have a regular job. He was part-time postal sorter. He was a part-time taxi driver. I don't know how he paid rent. His income was kind of erratic. So I'm thinking that in usual, whether your case is the Zodiac killings or the Manson mendacities or the Sharon Tate murders, which had nothing to do with Charlie Manson. But if it's that, there's going to be a bank sponsor, and then there's going to be a control agent in the field or control agents in the field to manage the scapegoat or the killers. And usually you have the killers or the shooters, and then, or the bayonetters in the case of Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger. You didn't really have a lot of shooting. There was some shooting. It was mainly bayoneting. But my point is that you do have a scapegoat who had no involvement with the murder, and then you have the murderers who are whisked away and no one knows their names, and they're never arrested, they're never arraigned, and they're never convicted. That's my experience with clandestine services, whether it's done at the highest level or the lowest level. So it's kind of unusual that you would actually find the actual murderer and then arraign and convict them of the murder. You can convict anybody, innocent or guilty. It's not difficult to do with our maritime admiralty law system, which is what our system's based on. It's not based on law of the land. It's a plea agreement system where you're guilty until proven innocent. You're guilty until proven innocent. That's maritime law. That's, I'm the admiral of my ship. I'm the captain of my ship. And I have a totalitarian policy on my ship. That's maritime law. That's how the United States operates. And if you don't believe me, go spend some time in a courthouse. You're going to have a hard time doing that because they don't want you in the courtrooms unless you're going to be a witness, in which case they ask you to wait in the hallway. And they have a person from the district attorney's office, and the clerk of the court has a clipboard, and she goes and interviews all the people at 8:30 in the morning for 30 minutes to find out who's in that courtroom, because they don't want media there. They do not want someone who's going to write a story. They don't want someone tape recording the proceedings. They don't want anyone videotaping the proceedings. And they don't want any person from the public who just wants to sit in on an arraignment. They don't want that. They only want the family of the victim or the defendants in the courtroom. That's it. So that's not public disclosure, people. I'm just telling you, that's not a new policy. That's an old policy. So if you think you really have public disclosures of what goes on in the courthouses in your community, you're naive. It's all secret. It's all done secretively. And that way, when the defendant says that their constitutional rights were ignored and trampled over, there's no record of that anywhere. And you'll just say, he's guilty. He's a whack job. He's crazy. That's how you conduct maritime law in a common law, constitutional law, fake country. Because the United States of America is fake. Because based on a fake constitution, which is not followed by our courts. So all you judges out there, I'm talking about you. I'm talking about you personally. You don't have to be a Supreme Court judge. I'm talking about, a municipal court judge, a traffic court judge. I'm talking about you too. From the bottom to the top, you guys are all owned and controlled under maritime law. So to recap, Church of Scientology, Process Church of the Final Judgment, the Church of Synanon, which required you shave your head, take an oath of poverty, make a 2-year commitment, have no bank account. Now you're completely dependent on food from the Church of Synanon. And it's an experiment, anthropology experiment, on how to conduct a cult in Santa Monica, which is walking distance to where Dakota Johnson finished her high school at the New Road School. And if in case you're curious, it was right on the beach. It was a former United States Army armory that was volunteered to be used for the Church of Synanon. See, whenever you have a military armory turning over their property to a church, that means it's a clandestine services operation. The military is not going to let, your local church move in there, okay? It's got to be part of a military program, which it was. Pacification and control of people who had drug and alcohol problems. That was the concept of the Church of Synanon. I will come back. I'm going to move forward. Then we had something that was called, of course, the Jesuits, which set up operation in San Francisco, around the time of the gold rush, which was a psyops in 1849, 1850. They constructed the University of San Francisco, the Lone College for Women, St. Ignatius Parish, St. Ignatius High School, set up St. Agnes Parochial School for elementary grades. That was there before the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, which is in that zip code. It's the same neighborhood. Well, guess what? Then they opened up the Hare Krishnas, or what's called the Krishna Consciousness Church or Temple. Right there by Sharon Meadows. Yeah, right where we had the free concert. Sharon Meadow, named after a banker who donated the land. Right there by University of San Francisco Jesuit University, walking distance from St. Ignatius High School, where Paul Pelosi went to high school. Walking distance, you got the Hare Krishna Consciousness Temple. And I'll be specific, just so you know I'm just not making it all up. The address was 2334 Stuart Street, San Francisco. Check it out. And Google the distance between St. Ignatius Church, which is the University of San Francisco, to there. It's, about a half a mile. It's about a half a mile, depending on which corner you took. That's pretty close. That's pretty close, right? That's like 750 meters. All right. Then what is the proximity to the church, the Process Church of Final Judgment? Because they had an administrative office, to be specific, at 407 Cole Street. What's the distance from the Process Church to the Hare Krishna Consciousness Temple? Half a mile. It's the same distance as it is to the Jesuits. So the Jesuits have an outpost called University of San Francisco, Lone Mountain Campus for Women, St. Ignatius High School, St. Ignatius Catholic Church. It's half a mile from the Krishna Consciousness Center. The British intelligence has a Process Church of Final Judgment, and it's located half a mile from the Krishna Conscious Center, which is also next door to Sharon Meadow. And this is a couple blocks away from the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, where Timothy Leary operated from 1965, where Abigail Folger's mother was the senior person above Timothy Leary, Enos Mejia. That's where Bill Graham and his free concerts were. That's where Janis Joplin had an apartment. That's where the Grateful Dead had a home. Okay? Janis Joplin is 23 years old. How's she going to get a Victorian home? All right? It's her record company got it for her, right? Because they got all those people set up there. George Harrison rolls in. He doesn't stay at a Hyatt Regency. He stays in Haight Ashbury. How's that work? And remember, what's going on in San Francisco in 1967 is going on in London, England, with the Maharishi, who's conducting seminars in London at the hotels, and then inviting people to private retreats like the Beatles. John Lennon and Paul McCartney are totally controlled and owned from the moment that they signed a record contract with EMI sometime during 1962. They won't give you a date because of the Pete Best, liability. Sometime during 1968, probably after June 6th, 1962, Brian Epstein, who was the fake manager of the Beatles, educated and indoctrinated in the Royal Army and psychiatrist hired by the Royal Army of United Kingdom and then sent to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Acting. He's the fake manager, and he signs a record deal for the Beatles. And at that moment, the Beatles are owned. They're owned by RCA Victor and CBS Masonic Eye. That's who owns the Beatles. That's the eye of the devil. That's the center of the bullseye. That's the Tavistock Institute. That's social engineering anthropology. That's anthropology 101. That's how do you manage the sheep? Well, you do it with drugs. You do it with free sex, free music, free concerts. You do it with electroshock treatment, and you do it with the Church of Krishna consciousness. You do it with the Maharishi. You do it with the Church of Synanon. You do it with the Holy Roman Catholic Church and the Holy See in Rome and the Jesuits in San Francisco and the Santa Catalina, Dominican school in Monterey, Spooksville, USA. And you do it through the Church of Synanon, which had an office on the beach right near the Anne Heche fiery car crash. About a mile and a half from there, they had the Church of Synanon. And then they had the New Road School, which is another indoctrination center. Dakota Johnson went to both the Santa Catalina School in CIA Monterey, and then for her senior year, she went to the New Road School in Santa Monica, in close proximity to where the Church of Synanon was operating for 15 years. They also opened a Church of Synanon in Oakland, California, to be specific, at 59 Grand Avenue by Lake Merritt. It's now the athletic club, the Oakland Athletic Club. And but it was the Church of Synanon in 1967. So you have the Church of Synanon in Oakland in 1967. That's in close proximity to Berkeley. Then you have the Hare Krishnas in Haight Ashbury in close proximity to the Jesuit University and St. Ignatius Parish. And then you have the Process Church moves in late 1967-68, right around the time of the Roman Polanski Sharon Tate fake marriage. The Church of the Process Final Judgment is in Haight Ashbury. Then the Hare Krishnas relocate to Berkeley, half a mile from People's Park, half a mile from where Patricia Hearst was kidnapped, half a mile from where Charlie Manson was given provisional housing near the Cal Berkeley campus, near Dwight Avenue in Berkeley. The Hare Krishna Temple, I'll be specific again, people, it's 2334 Stuart Street. I've personally been to that location, and I personally met with Srila Prabhupada, who was going by the name of Srila Hansa Duda when I met him. I met him in 1978, I believe. And again, he's working with people that had drug and alcohol problems, and he had strict rules. And I sat in on a little meeting where he was trying to talk to his followers, and I was a visitor of one of his guests who had taken LSD 90 times in 1 year. So you could say that his brain got restructured, right? And I'm listening to this guy. He's talking about the material world and why it's evil, and you should take an oath of poverty, and you shouldn't have fancy things. But I noticed that there was a 911 Porsche Carrera, kind of like what Paul Pelosi would drive. I noticed that was parked in the garage at 2334 Stuart Street in the back. So I took it in for a while, and then, when it was opening up for dialogue, I raised my hand, like we were in a classroom. And he said, yes. And I said, well, I think I heard you say that materialism is evil and you should shun personal belongings because it's narcissistic and it's rotten. I said, but who owns that 911 Carrera out there? And, he's like, okay, let's have another question. I said, I heard you drive it. I heard you had the keys to it. Anyway, that was kind of the end of the meeting, right? Because that's the reputation that I have, is that when I'm with bankers in a private conference room, or if I'm in a room typically with lawyers and bankers, because they typically protect each other, I always am careful about where I choose my seat. I usually want to sit near the door so I can exit. And I never turn my back to any of these people. I always position myself so that I'm in close proximity to be able to leave first. And then when I make my outrageous comments, that they consider that I'm a lunatic, because it's so truthful. Nobody ever says I'm lying. They say I'm crazy, but they never accuse me of lying, ever. Because they know I'm telling the truth. It's just they don't want to hear it, because it's like kryptonite. The truth is kryptonite to people who are running our society, who are running our anthropology. Anyway, then we have the Himalayan Institute, which was created immediately at the end of World War II, around 1945, 1946. The Himalayan Institute is attributed to Henry Miller, who again is a book author, novelist for anthropology, social science. And he's into sex magic, all the things that the Church of Scientology is into. Sex magic, auditing, getting your inner secrets, hallucinating, believing your own psychosis. That was a Big Sur, in close proximity to the Monterey Carmel mission, right? And then when tourism kicked in the late 50s, early 60s, they decided, the clandestine services said, we better move the sex magic 11 miles down Highway 1, which they did, down to Fort Hunter Liggett and the Hearst Castle. So 11 miles south, it's not Big Sur anymore. It's very, very remote. There's no stores. And they created the Esalen Institute, where Neil Young performed with Neil Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, 1 or 2 weeks after the Woodstock concert. Yeah, it was maybe 3 weeks after the Woodstock concert. They came back to California and they performed at the Esalen Institute, which pretty much tells you everything you need to know about Neil Young. He's at a CIA Institute of sex magic and mind restructuring, and he's playing his, Down by the River song. There he is. You can see it on YouTube. There he is. You can't deny that he's there. He's there. It's a CIA control center for operatives of the CIA. That explains why you say stupid things like, I'm going to pull my music off Spotify. But you don't own any music, so you can't pull any, can you? All right. So, Church of Scientology, Process Church of Final Judgment, the Himalayan Society, the Esalen Institute, the Hare Krishna, which goes by the Krishna consciousness, which also has a temple in Manhattan. To be specific, Lower East Manhattan. To be very specific, I'm talking about the address of 25 First Avenue on the 3rd floor. That's where the Hare Krishnas used to be located in 1967 in New York City. So they're in New York City and they're in San Francisco, and then they moved to Berkeley, which everybody knows that's a spook town. That's where the peace riots were held, right? Which weren't about peace. They were about conscription. So that's called sophistry, aka applied linguistics, aka liar, liar, pants on fire, cover stories. So that's 5. And then the other, so what have I got here? So I got Church of Scientology, Process Church, Church of Synanon, Himalayan Society, Esalen Institute, that's 5. Hare Krishna is a 6. And the San Francisco Jesuit Order of University of San Francisco, Lone Mountain Campus 4, and that's 7. So those are the 7 religious orders which all have clandestine services, funding, planning, and positioning in New York, in Manhattan, in San Francisco, in Santa Monica, in near the Dolby Theater where the Academy Awards and the Will Smith fake bitch slap to Chris Rock at the Dolby Theater near Franklin Avenue. The Church of Scientology has their visitor center right there, where the magic castle is. That's not sex magic, but it's black magic. It's illusion. It's Hollywood. It's what Hollywood is. Screen Actors Guild, it's a cult. It's like the Bankers Club. It's a cult. All right, that's my talk for today. And I wanted to just tell you a quick metrics alert on my channel. Essentially, believe it or not, even though my content is not deemed suitable for under 18 years old, I still have over 100 views from people that are between the ages of 13 and 17. And I'm just taking a small sample size of 15,000 views. And on 15,000 views, I had over 100 views from people over 13 years old but under 18. I had 950 views from people 18 to 24. That's 6%. I had 1,060 views from young adults aged 25 to 34. I had 606 views from people aged 35 to 44. I guess they're busy, you know, going to meetings and working for a living. Then I had 1,100 views from people 45 to 54. At 4,000 views from people 55 to 64. And my biggest audience is over 65 because they were all alive during the times of my stories of the 1960s. The Vietnam War and the psyops and the Zodiac killings and the Sharon Tate murders, which were later, 4 months later, rebranded as Manson cult murders, which is a total lie. They weren't. It had nothing to do with the murders at all. So I have over 63 interviews with the senior citizens over 65. And I just want to say that I appreciate all the views. I realize the videos go long and it's tedious and people don't have the time. They don't read books anymore. Nobody reads a book. Everyone's afraid to pick up a book because you'll get interrupted and you'll put it down. You got to pick it up, put it down. Nobody has 90 minutes to focus in on reading a book. I get it. And by the way, that's the purpose of these cell phones. ADD, attention deficit disorder, which is a, build it and they will come, field of dreams concept. If you can create a system that distracts people continuously, either with steroid football or steroid basketball or steroid Olympic games, and you can rig the event so that the right, fake story gets presented that tugs at your emotions, and the right TikTok videos are appeared, which I think are only 15 seconds long at TikTok, they're restructuring your brain. That is a form of restructuring. That's what Timothy Leary was working on in San Francisco, and at Harvard University in Cambridge, and at the Millbrook Institute in the Hudson Valley, in New York State, along the Hudson River, in the Hudson Valley, in Millbrook, New York. Timothy Leary and Richard Albert were working on how to restructure people's brains. They've tried LSD, they've tried psilocybin mushrooms, they tried electric shock treatments. They've, integrated work done with Albert Laverne in Manhattan at Bellevue State Hospital. They've integrated work with Louis Jolyon West in San Francisco, and his work with Jacob Rubinstein, aka Jack Ruby. He gave him an injection, and then you'll notice he went bye-bye. So there was no appeal trial, right? No appeal hearings for Jack Ruby because he died. Quick like a bunny rabbit after seeing Louis Jolyon West, who killed a 3,000-pound elephant, by the way. Did you know that? Louis Jolyon West, who's working with Abigail Folger's mother and Timothy Leary and Bill Graham and Sharon Tate's father, Paul Tate, working in San Francisco. He killed an elephant at the Oklahoma City Zoo before he came to San Francisco. He killed an innocent elephant overdosed it with LSD. The thing didn't die, so then they euthanized it using the, whatever they use, euthanization products, barbiturate poisoning, sodium pentothal, or whatever they use, sodium whatever. So there you go. That's my story for today. I hope you click the like and subscribe buttons. Have a great day. Bye-bye.